Well, hello, my legions of adoring 5 or 6 YouTube followers. Just a quick update here on the amp and the cabinet control box for those curious. Here is the Leslie Type 28 cabinet connector schematic diagram, which is very handy and not peeling away like the one on the amp is, unfortunately. So, where are we here? I've actually found the first fault in this unit, and it's actually a very common fault in this design. I've seen it before. Maybe I've even seen. Maybe I remember this because I saw it once before on this very Leslie, 30 years ago, 20 something years ago. But as you can see, this lead to the brake coil is broken, and it mounts to this terminal right here on the top of this relay. And the reason this breaks commonly, and this is a fault I've seen before, is because this relay is rubber shock mounted and it moves. You can see it's held there on the other side through a rubber grommet, and you see it's got some wiggle to it, to give it, some isolation from the cabinet. And this is a non-stranded wire. It is a single solid core wire. And as we know, with single solid core wires, is that if you bend them over and over again in the same spot, they break. They fatigue very quickly. The copper will work harden and then become brittle and snap. So the remedy for this is I'm going to repair it this time using a piece of stranded wire, and I'm gonna solder the stranded wire to this lead and then maybe secure it down somehow. I'm not sure. I haven't thought about how I'm going to do that, but I'm going to secure this down so that this end is no longer moving. And then we'll run a stranded wire to the relay so that it can take all that flexing without breaking. This capacitor is going to go. Oh, by the way, the symptom of this on this particular Leslie, if this coil wire breaks like this, what happens is the braking function no longer works on the unit. So when you switch the rotation off, instead of the brake kicking in, you will get the unit kind of free spinning. And that's also a modification you can do if you like that kind of slow spin down effect. At least I think that's a modification you can do. I seem to remember it. It's been a long time since I've worked on a Leslie, so there's it's a possibility I'm feeding you bunk, but if so, I'll correct it in the later videos. So anyway, yeah, this is part of the braking circuit, as is this capacitor. This thing's going to go. It's 200 microfarad at 50 volt. Pretty hard to find a straight 200 at that value. Usually you get them in the 220 flavor. Here's a 220 160 volt capacitor that's plenty small enough to fit in there. I might try that one. Its voltage rating's kind of high on it, and so it might kind of reform to an even higher capacitance than 220. We'll see. It'll probably be fine though. We'll check. Everything else in here seems to be in order though. I'm going to replace this ancient diode. I haven't tested it, but it's just cheap insurance. 50-year-old diode is. They weren't particularly great when they first came out. Let's just say that. Under the amplifier, I've had a chance to lightly clean in here. Again, everything looks pretty much in order. I measured the resistors. The resistors seem to be reasonably within value. Those 220Ks are both a little high, but they seem to be, both a little high, so they're relatively well matched. I haven't decided what I'm going to do about the main filter capacitor. I haven't really checked this old can, and as you can see, it's pretty old. But I think it's a 1985 date code, and I last serviced this thing in the 90s, so it's possible that I had an old stock can capacitor like this laying around and just plugged it on in. So I may have replaced this. Yeah, so I'm not sure what I'm going to do with that. Whether I'm going to try and find another can capacitor and take advantage of the fact that this thing is socketed, which is really beautiful, or whether I will just solder some capacitors on the back side of this socket and just cover up those holes with tape, or I'm not sure. That's kind of a chicken shit way to do it, but you know, these canned capacitors are not that easy to find anymore. There is a company that still makes them, so I'll look and see what the options are. Probably about $40 for one of those jokers, though. But seeing as how everything else in the amp appears to be in order, I haven't measured the power supply or anything yet, but first glance everything seems to be in order. So maybe spending $40 on a canned capacitor is money well spent. The rust on the transformers cleaned up okay. I just gave it a light brushing with a brass brush that I dipped in WD-40, and we got all the loose stuff off. It's presentable, you know, doesn't have loose flaky rust on it anymore. So that's it for now. I haven't done any work on the cabinet yet. I haven't pulled the motor out or worked on any of that stuff. First things first, we got to get the amp running, which means, you know, probably new capacitors in some way. Check and possibly replace these coupling capacitors, although I think they're fine. They both measured very close to each other. Yeah, fix that coil, fix that braking coil for the motor, and replace that diode. So I'll get all that done, and then next video we'll have this stuff kind of hooked up on the bench, and we'll measure the amplifier and see that it's doing what it's supposed to, and we'll test the motor, the motor control and all that stuff. All right, till next time.